Good morning, everyone. My name is Juanita Bohannon. I work at the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission, and we're about to observe a very, very exciting event for youth in our community. So I want you to sit back, relax, and just observe and give the youth your undivided attention. And I'll turn it back over to Jamie Bryant, who is the event coordinator. Thank you. Let's give her a hand, too.
Good morning, everyone. I thank you for coming out today. Your presence is highly appreciated, and I really enjoy the fact that the kids have worked hard to give you their best for what they were taught. Okay, we have a public forum style debating. In this style of debate, there is a given topic with two teams and position to each topic. These positions are identified as affirmative and opposition. Each affirmative team and opposition team are given an opportunity to present 3 constructive arguments and 1 rebuttal, which is the closing argument. In each constructive argument, each team is allowed to present new ideas and new arguments while being able to bring in points of refutation from the opponent's preceding speech. The teams are permitted to take notes while the opposing team is speaking. In the rebuttal closing argument, teams are not permitted to bring new ideas to their argument, but instead are to refute any points from an opponent's previous speech and formally bring their arguments to a close. Between each set of speeches, both teams will be given 1 minute to devise refutations from an opponent's previous speech and refine their individual speech. So they will have 1 minute to confer with each other to decide what they want to, which argument they want to present that they feel will be the strongest. So the methodology. In the weeks leading up to today's events, participants met at City Hall from October 6th through November 3rd. The trainers taught them the purpose of debates, skills for debating, how to research, mock debates, presentation skills, and public speaking skills. The debate coordinators from each school and organization attended the weekly sessions to provide their group with moral support. Each Saturday session covered the debate topics and arguments developed with a project-based learning approach. And I want to give a big shout out to the debaters, to the debate coordinators from each school, because they were here every Saturday, and that's a big commitment in the middle of the school year. And for them to come and to be committed to this, and the parents as well, if you all can stand, please, they deserve a round of applause because they were very on top of it. I thank you all very much. And right now, I want to introduce to you our moderator, Mr. Michael Griffin.
Ms. Bryant, thank you for the kind introduction. First and foremost, I want to congratulate the parents that are here this morning. Every year I clear my calendar so I can participate in this event. I think I get more enjoyment out of what's going to take place here than the actual students. So please give yourself a round of applause. As a former participant in the debate team in high school, I am very clear about what the power of debate can do, and then also the ability it gives you to look at issues in our society very critically. A lot of times we hear talking heads pretty much about their own side and their own opinions of issues, but this whole experience should give these students an opportunity to view their world more critically. This particular debate, and in years past, is modeled after the movie The Great Debaters. So please enjoy yourself.
Hello.
My name is Kyra Watkins, and I'm a second-time participant in the annual Great Youth Debate. On behalf of myself and every teen and young adult that is represented in this year's debate, I tell you that this has been a joyous experience. It does a heart good to hear the youth talk about such relevant and pressing issues. Week after week, for 4 weeks, the faces you've seen behind me were dedicated to supporting an idea, one side of an idea, and gathering information to support that idea on issues that today we may not have much say in, but tomorrow we shall be the negotiating factor to everything that goes and do not go in society. But my praise does not stop at the faces you see behind me. I would like to extend a tremendous gratitude to all the adults that had a hand in putting this together, an opportunity that allows youth to be productive. One thing I've learned from observation is that teens are not productive because they do not wish to be productive, but because the accessibility of organizations in which they can be productive are limited. That's why it is so vital to save recreation centers, to save art programs, and to make new programs such as these that allow us to debate out issues that are so important in society. The Bible reads in Proverbs 22:6, "Train up a child in the way they should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it." If a man ever came to me inquiring to see the future, I would tell him he's looking at it. And one thing I know about the future is when that day comes, it shall be history in the making. The people you see behind me has worked so hard to put together this debate for you guys, and we look forward to making you proud. God bless you, may God keep you, and we pray that you enjoy the debates.
The first debate, education is necessary for the advancement of society. For the affirmative constructive, we have the great educators, and for the opposition constructive, we have the future of education.
Today we are defending the topic, education is necessary for the advancement of society. My teammates and I will tell a story about the necessity of education. Education is your life partner and is the most important thing to ensure success and happiness. Why, you ask? Good education leads to a job in the short term, a career long term, and this determines your lifestyle, which is whether you live in a nice house or apartment, owning a nice car, etc. How you live, whether you live in a nice neighborhood, it provides support for your family to be able to send your children to good schools. Good jobs also have perks and incentives such as paid insurance and health care for your family. Education also leads to a satisfying and interesting career that could provide opportunities to travel, promotions, and eventually paid retirements. Your choice of jobs depends on your level of education. In general, higher paying jobs require post-secondary training. Your earning also depends on your education level. For example, a high school graduate will earn $20,000 per year, whereas a 2-year associate's degree will earn you $38,000 per year, and a 4-year college degree will earn you $55,000 per year. These statistics on job pay were from the U.S. Department of Labor data. So you see, the more education you have, the higher your earnings will be. How much more will you earn in a 30-year career if you have a 4-year college degree? Almost 3 times as much as a person who only completed high school. $1.5 million compared to $600,000. Therefore, education is the most important component for individual success. And the higher the education levels, the better. Are there exceptions to this rule? Sure. But we're debating the proposition based on a whole society, not exceptions. My partners will continue our story to show other factors that make education essential to the advancement of society. Thank you.
Education as defined by the proposition plainly states that the only education to be considered under the resolution is post-secondary education. Post-secondary education is generally accepted as education after the completion of high school. If we are to adopt the proposition stance that only post-secondary education is necessary to move society forward, then we are in turn declaring that all members of our society that do not continue on to a traditional four-year degree course of study after completion of K through 12 do not contribute to the advancement of society. The opposition values and respects all members of society regardless of their educational background. Child laborer Andrew Carnegie acknowledged the importance of Booker T. Washington's work to enhance the economic security of African Americans following the Civil War by educating the population in the skills and trades necessary to fuel the Industrial Revolution. Washington wrote that the individual who can do something that the world wants done will, in the end, make his way. The world wants and needs food to be cultivated, water to be irrigated, roads and bridges to be built, and modern cities to emerge where there once were none. The world wants sound agricultural and industrial education. In 21st century terms, that is an investment in vocational education and K through 12 education that prepares students to enter the workforce with the skills necessary to earn a living wage. The opposition proposes, 1, that the investment the U.S. government has made in vocational education for high school students is necessary for the advancement of society. 2, that a four-year course of study is not necessary to enter the workforce and earn a living wage. 3, that any society requires skilled workers to build the infrastructure, which is the backbone of all societies. 4, that contrary to W.E.B. Du Bois' writing that, was there ever a nation on God's fair earth civilized from the bottom upward? Never. It is, ever was, and ever will be, from the top downward that culture filters. The opposition takes the firm position that culture, as well as economic security for the population, should bubble up and not trickle down. Due to the investment that the U.S. government has made in vocational education, students entering the workforce after the completion of high school enter prepared to apprentice as carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and welders. Many students enter the workforce prepared to enter the health industry as licensed practical nurses, state-tested nurse aides, and phlebotomists. It is from the sturdy roots of vocational education that many of the four-year courses of studies offered at post-secondary institutions arise, not because vocational education is obsolete, but rather that vocational education provides the fertile soil for economic security and social advancement to grow from.
Let us continue our education story. Another issue we have is, what part does the government play in educating its citizens? We believe education is the role for the federal government, which stems from the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. As we all know, the Bill of Rights lists these freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble. All three of these apply to the importance of education. Now the U.S. Department of Education gives funds to all 50 states. This shows the government values education and supports the right of education for everyone. The government has grants such as Pell Grants and loans and work-study programs to support higher education. Therefore, the government in Washington, D.C. pays for secondary and post-secondary education. Another issue we have is, does education advance our country? Yes, educated citizens is the key to democracy. Better educated citizens pay more taxes. Taxes help the federal government pay off national debt. Taxes provide for our safety by supporting the military and research for new weapons. Also, better educated workers produce higher quality products. Better products help us have a better trade balance with other nations around the globe. Our higher education programs gain respect from other countries. Proof is, large numbers of foreign students come to the United States for college. Many stay for good jobs after graduation, such as doctors and other medical specialists. In conclusion, we have shown education is paramount to success of the individual and of the country. We have shown you education is a right. We also informed you the government's role is to fund state secondary and post-secondary institutions. And last, education in the United States helps the stature of our country by the U.S. funding free education for all citizens. This shows everyone around the world how much we value education. Education is a right based on reverence for speech, press, and assembly to share ideas. The government's role is the funding of K through 12 and post-secondary. Education keeps us strong and competitive. So next time you feel like education isn't the role of government, think about everything the government has done for this country. and let it be the reason why young teens and adults are successful today.
The opposition values and respects all members of society, regardless of their educational background. The opposition maintains that economic security should bubble up and not trickle down. To ensure that all members of our society are capable of earning a living wage, it is important to recognize the value of vocational education at the high school level and non-traditional educational opportunities. The proposition would have you believe that the only advancement that occurs in our society is due to the population having a post-secondary education. The U.S. Department of Education, Office of Vocational and Adult Education invests $1.9 billion annually to prepare individuals for successful careers. Tech Prep provides assistance to the states to fund the development and operation of programs consisting of the last 2 years of high school and 2 years of non-traditional education, leading to a 2-year certificate or possibly an associate's degree. The U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that many entry-level skilled labor positions that require only a high school diploma, apprenticeship, and/or certificate have hourly starting wages that are in fact living wages. For example, Boilermakers make $26 an hour. Welders would make $16.25 an hour. Licensed practical nurses would make $20 an hour. All of these job fields are projected to continue to grow. Boilermakers, welders, and licensed practical nurses advance our society. The proposition points that skilled trades without post-secondary education are not good for the advancement of society. The opposition realizes that many members of society will not enter a 4-year course of study after completion of their secondary education. In order to advance our society, all members must be able to constructively contribute. The proposition would have you believe that those who do not obtain a 4-year course of study are second-hand citizens and do not contribute to the advancement of society. When our ancestors landed on the shores of this great country, it was agricultural and industrial ingenuity that carried our nation out of log cabins and disconnected settlements to what you see today. The vocationally trained workers grew the nation's food, built the nation's infrastructure, and recovered from economic downturns because of the vocationally trained workers were put to work during the Great Depression, and we are all beneficiaries of the New Deal. Do not undervalue the hard work that vocationally trained workers poured into the country by saying that they did not contribute to the advancement of society. The vocationally trained worker drove the advancement of society. Thank you.
Education has intrinsic value beyond just higher paying jobs. It gives you a basic understanding of the world. It provides this venue to learn basic concepts of moral and ethical conduct: fairness, honesty, reliability, and hard work. Historically, learning basic concepts used to be handled by a home and church. Since the mid-1800s, it became the role of the schools. My source is appliedresearchcenter.org. Also, education makes you a better person. Now colleges and universities offer a curriculum that includes philosophy, arts, and religion to give students greater understanding of ethical conduct. That gives structure to our thinking and actions. Another issue is education builds for our future. The baby boomers who gave us much innovation are now retiring. Higher education will provide new inventors, scientists, and researchers to replace the baby boomers. The new well-educated citizens will replace the baby boomers so that we do not have a shortage of skilled workers. This ensures progress of the country to compete and thrive in global economy. Winning the hearts and minds of the people around the world is based on our freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom to choose, and freedom to prosper. Education has helped the United States have the reputation as the land of opportunity. Well-educated citizens help protect these freedoms by voting and staying informed about local and national issues. To end our story, let me review briefly our position. Education is the most important vehicle for an individual's success. Higher education is necessary to provide the innovators for tomorrow. The federal government has supported free education for all of the citizens and still supports it today. And an educated population helps keep the country free and strong. Therefore, education is necessary for the advancement of our society. Thank you.
The opposition values non-traditional education, whether it occurs when a student is enrolled in secondary education or in a formal or informal setting, such as an apprentice in a trade union or a job training program, or when enrolled in a diploma or certificate program, either during or after high school. The U.S. Department of Education does not recognize such programs as traditional post-secondary education. The proposition points skilled trades without post-secondary education, without a second post-secondary degree advancement for the society cannot be obtained, or not good for the advancement of society because they do not take into consideration the many skills levels of workers that are necessary to advance society. It is important to recognize that for society to function and advance, we need hands-on sanitation technicians as well as scientists who develop ways to treat waste. To keep the population working in advancement society, many individuals with different skill sets are needed. Not all students leaving secondary education will look to enter a 4-year course of study. This is not a function of academic achievement or lack of drive and determination. This is an expression of choice. Job Corps, a federal funded program administered by the U.S. Department of Labor, is a free education and training program that helps young youth learn a career, earn a high school diploma or GED, and find and keep a good job. In 2009, as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, Job Corps implemented Green Student Training Program, an area that is expected to continue to grow and provide jobs. Judge Sergio A. Gutierrez, a graduate of Job Corps, stated, "I believe Job Corps is one of the best programs taxpayers can support because my story is one that repeats itself across the country." Judge Gutierrez continued that young people are waiting to develop and contribute to their families and their community thanks to Job Corps. Job Corps is driving the advancement of society. DePaul Cristo Rey High School, the high school that works with Cincinnati, has an innovative corporate work study program that trains students to work in a corporate setting in order to offset the cost of secondary education. DePaul Cristo Rey is driving the advancement of society. Woodward Career Technical High School, part of Cincinnati Public Schools, prepares students in 3 career fields: 1, healthcare academic; 2, advanced in manufacturing; and 3, constructive academy. All of these career fields, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, are expected to continue to grow. Woodward Career Technical High School is driving the advancement of society. Thank you.
The opposing team has presented a variety of issues that I will cover today individually. The first issue they covered was education beyond high school isn't a positive factor. But education is a positive factor because without education, we wouldn't have positive skilled workers. For example, doctors, lawyers, and scientists. The next issue they covered was college education isn't needed for many service jobs. But that's not true. You earn money based on education and knowledge inherited. All the innovations, inventions, and the new products are made by those individuals with college or technical schooling. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, which involves science. Ben Franklin invented the glasses so you can read. Bill Gates invented Microsoft Windows. The next issue they mentioned was higher education doesn't guarantee success and happiness. Success and happiness doesn't require higher education, does require higher education because it allows you to adapt to newer situations in everyday life. Being well educated gets you a good job. And with a good job, happiness is bound to come. The education of our citizens is necessary to make us competitive with other nations because education takes educated workers to make good products bought or traded by other nations. The U.S. traded with China, Canada, and Japan. Everyone has the ability to learn higher education because Every subject like math, science, social studies, and/or language arts are common fundamentals. Most service jobs include educational activities. Education, either by the company or the company paying for college or technical school. For example, a scientist has to know science. A store clerk must know math, and a nurse must know the common beneficials of how to take care of their patient. In conclusion, we have presented that the education is cost-effective. It's the role of government to provide education. The government has provided funds to the states, colleges, and education makes the country stronger and envy of other nations of the world. Thank you.
The proposition resolution that education is not necessary for the advancement of society should not be adopted because of the narrow definition of education is the proposition proposes. The proposition has laid out a case that disregards the skilled men and women who built this nation and continue to drive its economy. The U.S. became a dominant economic power because we could build what the world wanted and we could grow what the world needed. The opposition proposes that, number one, the investment the U.S. government has made in vocational education for high school students and non-traditional education is necessary for the advancement of society. Number two, that a 4-year course of study is not necessary to enter the workforce and earn a living wage. Number three, that any society requires skilled workers to build the infrastructure, which is the backbone of society. And number four, the economic security of the population should bubble up and not trickle down. The opposition has constantly proven that the many programs supported by the government and private industry to prepare the students to enter the workforce, earning a living wage, and exercise the choice to pursue non-traditional education is a sound investment. The opposition has shown that a 4-year course of study is not necessary to enter the workforce and earn a living wage while helping the nation compete in a global marketplace. The labors of American men and women in agriculture and industry contributes to the advancement of society. The opposition has demonstrated that the skilled workers needed to build our infrastructure in our country are not second-hand citizens because of their educational choice. The opposition firmly believes that the economic security for the population, in order to be effective and reach all citizens, it must buckle up and not trickle down. This bubble up effect begins in the fertile soil of vocational education. It is important to maintain focus on the resolution at hand and not allow the issues that the proposition has brought forward that are off topic to cloud the truth. Education is proposed by the proposition is not necessary for the advancement of society. The Fancinata side suggests that success and happiness is guaranteed after college. It is not guaranteed after you finish college. You have to pay back college fees. Money after education is not really that much after you pay fees for college, living expenses such as food, car notes, and bills. Loans, they say that the government loan many times. How many times have you heard on TV and radios of college students in default with their loans? Loans you have to pay back after you finish college.
Time's up.
Okay. Thank you.
The second debate. Access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. For the affirmative constructive, we have We Care Health Care. For the opposition constructive, we have the authority of health care.
The issue at hand today is the question of whether or not health care is a right. It is. In the preamble to the Constitution, our founding fathers wrote to establish this great nation's most basic principles, calling us to promote the general welfare, so that every member of our society has the opportunity to flourish. The fundamental right of every person to be well, to be healthy, was important enough to our predecessors that it was included in the document which governs our nation. Not only is it a right, but it's the responsibility of the government to provide the means to attain that right. Our country was founded on the assertion that all men are created equal. That is the principle which makes us strong. If all men are indeed created equal, then everyone should have access to affordable health care. To this day, it remains an unattainable dream for many families, and that is wrong. We are guaranteed the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and yet there is nothing happy about a situation where a family cannot afford to treat their child because the financial burden would be too great. This calls to mind a recent speech by President Obama, where he references an experience he had with a family struggling to pay for their 8-year-old daughter's battle with leukemia. They would have lost everything had it not been for the Affordable Care Act. This emphasizes the fact that the current system is flawed and weak and needs to change, so that it is fair for everyone, so that America can be strong again, so that everyone has the opportunity to achieve the American dream. The best manifestation of this right to health care is through the Affordable Care Act. It will put in place strong consumer protections, provide coverage options for citizens who had never hoped of receiving health care before, and it is designed to give people the tools they need to make informed decisions about their health. Not only this, but it will cover children and people with pre-existing conditions who were previously denied coverage. Some would have you believe that the cost to implement such a system of national health care would be too impossibly high, but today we will show you that this is simply not the case. The numbers from valid and reliable sources, such as the Congressional Budget Office, have shown that the benefits actually outweigh the initial cost. We will also direct your attention to other countries which have the system already in place and have had success where our current system has failed. Today, we will show you that healthcare is a right, not just a privilege, and that it is necessary to bring justice for everyone. Thank you.
Our government is charged with upholding the constitutional rights of the people. The Constitution does not enumerate a right to health care. Indeed, the linchpin for the Affordable Care Act hinged on the constitutionality of the affordability for Congress to tax. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts wrote that the court did not pass judgment on the wisdom of law, only its constitutionality. The question of its constitutionality did not center on any presumed right, but rather the tax authority of Congress. Universal health care is not an issue that has just come up, but has been around. In 1935 with Roosevelt, 1947 with Truman, and 1954 with Eisenhower. All of these different administrations tried to pass universal health care, but why didn't they succeed? The opposition maintains 3 key points. The affordability that will vary between individuals. The only exception will be granted for financial burdens, religious objections, and undocumented immigrants, or if you're on the lowest paying plan and it takes more than 8% of your household income. Those without health care coverage will pay a tax up to $695 a year, which will exceed to $2,085, or 2.5% of a household income. For lower wage owners, this would be a hardship, and IRS would not be able to collect health care tax if the individual qualifies for earned income credit. Our second point, a right applies to everyone and a privilege to a selected few. Senate Majority Leader Reid stated, soon virtually every woman, every man, and every child in America will have access to health care they can afford and receive that will be affordable to them. Virtually does not encompass everyone. A right applies to all individuals. A right does not marginalize the most vulnerable in our society and exclude them. Our final point, universal health care will create an unnecessary financial burden on individuals, state, and federal government. This could cause a burden on our federal government for its health care not being paid, on states because of the expansion of Medicaid, and the individuals that have lower wages will not be able to pay for their health care. Health care was intended to help all individuals, but in the end, if they cannot afford it, who is it really helping? Thank you.
Affordable health care is a right, not a privilege, and here's why. When you look at the short-term perspective of affordable health care, your automatic thought is taxes. Yet when you look at the long-term perspective of affordable health care, contrary to popular belief, it does help decrease the national debt. The Congressional Budget Office estimated a $143 billion decrease in the national debt solely on health care reform alone in the year 2018. And also, the reform allows perks for businesses. In the year 2010 to 2013, the maximum tax exemption for a business was 35%. But in the year 2014, there will be a 50% tax exemption, maximum tax exemption for businesses. And between me and you, we all know how businesses love their tax breaks. It was Frederick Douglass who said, "I see no right superior to the right of humanity." How inhumane is it that a country that can provide affordable health care and overturn a national crisis choose not to? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the unalienable rights given to us by God, not the Constitution. And without the support of the health care reform, we violate that right. So I say to you today that affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. Thank you.
What type of right of health care, if any? Health care is an enumerated constitutional right and has not been recognized by the Supreme Court as such. The Supreme Court has only recognized the constitutional right of Congress to tax. It is important to distinguish between a natural right and a constitutional right. John Locke, a Western philosopher, recognized three natural rights: the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to estate. A constitutional right is a legal right that the government extends to all of its citizens. Affordable health care is not a natural right because it is dependent upon persons to create it. Affordable health care is not a constitutional right, as the Supreme Court pointed out by its refusal to uphold the Affordable Health Care Act based upon the argument that it is a right. The affirmative proposition proposes that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege, which makes the presumption that health care is a right. The affirmative wishes to cloud the resolution that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege, by its points that it is available to every person, that the Supreme Court passed it as a right, and that it is affordable to everyone. Before any consideration can be given to the resolution, the affirmative must first prove that access to affordable health care is a right. The opposition argument that affordability will vary between individuals is a valid negation of the resolution, because a natural right would extend to all individuals and a constitutional right would extend to all citizens of a particular government, here citizens of the United States. As my teammate quoted Senate Majority Leader Reid as saying, virtually every man, woman, and child in America will have access to health care they can afford. This seems to be more of a financial statement than a statement on rights, especially because it excludes 30 million Americans. A conservative estimate of the Congressional Budget Office reports roughly 30 million Americans will be left uninsured by the Affordable Health Care Act. That is the populations of New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, and San Diego combined. This does not sound like an equitable distribution of a constitutional right. The reason why universal health care failed to pass muster in 1935, 1947, 1954, and as recently as 1984 during the Clinton campaign for presidency is quite simple. Universal health care will create an unconstitutional government monopoly of the healthcare delivery system in this country and violate the constitutional rights of doctors, hospitals, insurance companies, and individuals by dictating where one must go to receive health care. What type of care will one receive, and how much a doctor, hospital, or insurance company will be able to earn if the Affordable Care Act is not changed? Thank you.
Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The Affordable Care Act, or ACA, is the best manifestation of this right because our current system of healthcare is treating it as a privilege for the wealthy, while the ACA provides healthcare for all Americans, regardless of income. Not only does our current system treat healthcare as a privilege, but it does not even provide sufficient care for those who can't afford to use it. According to PolitiFact, Americans, on average, pay more for health care than any other nation on earth. Despite this fact, the U.S. is still ranked 37th out of 191 countries in overall healthcare performance, according to the World Health Report. However, if the U.S. implemented the Affordable Care Act, the nation's healthcare would assume its role as a right rather than a privilege, as well as improve the nation's overall healthcare by providing universal healthcare for all of its citizens. To ensure that everyone has healthcare, the government will provide affordable healthcare for all of its citizens and will even impose a tax penalty on those who do not have health insurance. Also, insurance companies would be required to insure people with pre-existing conditions such as cancer or diabetes, whereas in the past, these people found it very difficult to find a company that would insure them. In doing this, the U.S. will have a healthcare system similar to that of Canada or Great Britain, which, along with providing better care for its citizens, also costs less per capita than the United States system does today. Americans, on average, spend over $8,300 a year on health insurance, more than both Great Britain and Canada combined. Also, according to the United Nations, the U.S. was ranked 37th in life expectancy, while Great Britain and Canada are both in the top 15, showing that the U.S. provides poorer care for its citizens while costing more for its citizens. Not only is the U.S. life expectancy low compared to other nations, there is also a large disparity between socioeconomic classes throughout the country. Low-income men have an average life expectancy of only 70 years, while women in the most affluent class have a life expectancy of up to 81 years, caused by the fact that the wealthy have more access to healthcare facilities, receive preventive care, and can afford the insurance to cover even the most extreme medical conditions. Under the ACA, however, these opportunities will be available for everyone. People of all classes can afford preventive care, allowing conditions to be detected earlier and cured before the situation becomes an emergency. The ACA does not just provide the wealthy with quality health care. Instead, people of all backgrounds are taken care of. After all, isn't that what makes America the greatest country in the world? Caring for all of its citizens, regardless of class. Universal health care in the United States is necessary. It will allow for everyone to have affordable health care and bring the United States system up to par with the rest of the world, all while increasing the average life expectancy for all Americans. Just as former President John F. Kennedy once said, all of us do not have equal talents, but all of us should have an equal opportunity to develop our talents. Thank you.
The affirmative is yet to provide the burden of proof that access to affordable health care is a right. Simply because universal health care exists in many Western countries does not mean that it is best for the United States. What is best for the United States is to adhere to the Constitution, the ideals that have made the United States such a great nation. A right to affordable health care does not exist. The conversation around affordable health care does not approach the question of a presumed right. The conversation centers strictly on financial aspects of health care. Dr. Edmund Pellegrino wrote in a journal of the American Medical Association that a medical need in itself constitutes a moral claim on those equipped to help. The opposition is not arguing that individuals do not deserve health care. We are arguing that a right to access affordable health care does not exist. The United States provides several insurance plans to cover Americans that are not insured. Many provide for access to free and sliding scale clinics for individuals that are not insured. Many school districts provide screening and access to free services for their students. If an individual is unable to pay for a hospital or doctor bill, many offer access to grants and to pay the bills, or even some waive the obligation to pay. An obligation to pay for one's health care is no different than the obligation to pay for one's utilities, food, and clothing. Many families have experienced a prolonged illness or catastrophic diagnosis. Unfortunately, find that in order to obtain relief from crushing debt that they may need to file bankruptcy. The fact that many Americans find themselves in this unfortunate situation does not differ from Americans that filed bankruptcy due to mortgage crisis. Is it fair to have individuals live a comfort lifestyle with all the creature comforts while others scramble to pay all their financial obligations? The answer is no. If someone is dependent on oxygen and needs to use an electric concentrator, a feeding pump that uses electricity, or even an individual that depends on an electric pump to suction their tracheotomy, if they need to not pay their electric bills, they can receive a 30-day notice or a 30-day extension before disconnection. The utility or other members of society are not required to ensure the individual has electricity. There are many programs, federal and state, designed to prevent those individuals from losing electricity, but there is no right to presume.
Time's up.
Thank you.
I would like to state that our opponent had first started off with the quality of healthcare. The quality of healthcare, even though they said it would be low, I want you to consider this. What is the quality of healthcare who's someone who can't afford it? Next, they said bankruptcy. Well, 62.1% of all US bankruptcies come from medical expensive. So wouldn't healthcare get rid of that? Or at least lower it? Our opponent said that, the second opponent said that it was a right. Doesn't that prove our point alone? Out of the top 10 nations, the US and India are the only two without universal health care. Amongst those two, they have the highest unemployment rate, with the US at 9.6 and India at 10.8. China, who has a universal health care, has 4.3 unemployment rate, which is much lower than ours. And also Japan, who has a 5% unemployment rate, which is also much lower than ours. They say, how can people afford it? How can the lower people afford it? Or how can people who have health problems afford it? Well, it's a fixed income. So it works out for everyone who can afford it, they could afford it. So if you can't, that's why it's being implemented. Because if you don't have enough money to pay for whatever your medical expenses are, that's what the ACA does. It pays for it. It gives you the insurance that you will have someone to help you out. As a nation, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Help one another? And our first speaker, the first opponent speaker, said it didn't pass the first time it was presented to Congress. Well, does that make it okay? There was a bunch of things that weren't passed, such as women's right. It wasn't passed the first time, or the Civil Rights Act wasn't passed the first time. But does it mean it's all right? Does that make it acceptable to society that it didn't pass? The fact is, it did pass now. So I close with this. What makes America exceptional? It is the bonds that holds us together. It is the fact that we are the most diverse nation in the world. The belief that our destiny is shared, and that it is our responsibility as not only a state, but as a country, to protect one another. So I leave you that it is our duty to leave the future generations with the right tools. So wouldn't leaving it with healthcare be the right tools? Wouldn't that make it a right to leave to your children and your children's children, to protect them from any problems, anything that could come up? Thank you.
Good morning. Affordability will vary between individuals. A right applies to everyone. Universal health care will create an unnecessary financial burden on the individual states and the federal government. Our valid negative resolution that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. A right extends to everyone, and 30 million Americans will not be covered by the Affordable Care Act. This is not an equitable distribution. Individuals should not be penalized with the additional tax burden if they are unable to obtain coverage. This is a form of currency. The unnecessary financial burden that many individual states and federal government will face are unacceptable. Individuals should not be coerced by the federal government to obtain health coverage or pay an additional tax. States should not be coerced to extend Medicaid and face losing federal dollars for their medical plans. United States Representative John Campbell commented in 2009 that rights are not given you something for free. They are about protecting natural liberties from those who would take them away from you. For instance, the Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms. It does not, however, say that you get guns for free if you don't have one. The Affordable Care Act is not about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as the proposition would have you believe. Life and the pursuit of happiness are more dependent upon the access to affordable food, shelter, clothing, yet none of these things are right. John Locke recognized when the right to life defined that a right as a right not to be killed, not to be injured, and not to be abused is an injury and abuse to individual and states to mandate or coerce them into paying for any consumer good for another individual. Health care is a consumer good of a like no different than electricity. Access to affordable health care is not a right. The proposition must first demonstrate that health care is a right. If the resolution is to be adopted, as recently as in June, poll conducted, CBS and the New York Times, 2/3 of Americans wanted the Supreme Court to overturn part or all of the Affordable Health Care Act. Plainly, most Americans believe that a right to access affordable health care does not exist. Thank you.
Debate 3. Economies of foreign countries have a significant impact on the United States recovery. For the affirmative constructive, we have Team Paycheck. For the opposition constructive, we have Team Cincinnatus.
Issue: how does foreign countries impact U.S. recovery? Number one, North American Free Trade Agreement had lowered tariffs to create jobs in agriculture. NAFTA successfully traded among nations that had tripled from $297 billion to $930 billion. Business investments in the U.S. had risen by 117%. Number two, U.S. employment rose from 110.8 million people in 1993 to 137.6 million jobs that have been created since 1993. That's a 24% increase. 3, Canada and Mexico had 37% of growth for U.S. agriculture exports since 1993. Not only do we trade with Mexico, Mexico is the top export destination for U.S.-grown beef, rice, soybean, corn. In conclusion, NAFTA has impacted and created more jobs, helped our economy, increased immigration. Thank you.
In the farewell address, George Washington stated that we have to isolate ourselves from all foreign affairs. With that said, why should we move our jobs overseas? Isn't that getting us involved? It is, and it only makes our economy worse and the other economy better. After the Great Depression, the U.S. moved into an isolation period. We stopped all trade with major countries and stopped all affairs. This period restored our economy. Now our economy is heading back to the Depression if we don't stop. The U.S. has greatly reduced its manufacturing and outsourced a large amount of jobs. Although the loss of U.S. manufacturing is not due to some inexorable shift to post-industrial economy, it is due to a failure of U.S. policies and the expansion of other nations' mercantilist policies. If from 2000 to 2010, manufacturing output had grown at the same rate as that of the rest of the business sector, the U.S. would have 3.8 million more manufacturing jobs today. Therefore, as a country, we should seriously consider diminishing our outsourced jobs and slowly become an isolated country until we can fix our own problems.
On January 1st, 2004, the U.S. signed a free trade agreement, also known as the FTA, with Singapore. The free trade agreement includes eliminating tariffs, importing quotas, and preferences on most goods and services. The FTA with Singapore has benefited America monetarily. U.S. good exports to Singapore in 2011 were $31.4 billion, up 8.2% or $2.4 billion from 2010, and up 76% from 2000. This benefits American recovery because it increases the amount of money we make from Singapore, and this amount increases each year, increasing how much money we make over time. Another benefit that the FTA guarantees is U.S. firms' key services markets in Singapore, especially in financial services. This benefits U.S. recovery by raising capitals, buying and selling financial securities. This also includes banks, insurance, and credit card companies. Another country that we have a trade surplus with is Germany. The America's export to Germany amounted to $54.5 billion, 4.2% of overall U.S. exports, according to the world's richest countries.com. Passenger cars amount to $8.5 billion. Pharmaceutical preparations amount to $5.6 billion. Civilian aircraft amounts to $5.4 billion. Medical equipment amounts to $2.5 billion. Semiconductors amount to $1.9 billion. Industrial equipment, $1.6 billion. Other chemicals, $1.5 billion. Precious golds, $1.4 billion. Testing instruments, $1.4 billion. And telecommunications, $1.3 billion. This increases the stability of employment in the U.S. You do the math.
My opponents say outsourcing reduces the prices of goods. This is true. My opponents want you to believe that outsourcing is good, that is great, that will bring us wealth beyond our dreams. However, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, it will not. Any economic benefit from lower prices is greatly and truly offset by the numbers of job loss due to outsourcing. People who are not financially supported will need assistance from the government. This puts more stress on our government. It also gives us more unnecessary debt. You see, one of my dear aunts, she works in manufacturing. Is it really worth it if she could be laid off at any moment? No, ladies and gentlemen, it is not. Less jobs will not further our nation. Also, who the U.S. outsources to can greatly affect our reputation. We cannot afford any bad blood between the U.S. and other nations. So you must and have to understand, globalization hurts us in the long run. Moreover, higher prices are necessary because higher prices keep the money in our economy. Thank you.
The issue at hand today is economies of foreign countries have a significant impact on U.S. recovery. We owe these foreign countries way too much money. China's exports total $129 billion. Imports total $411 billion since 2011, making a total of $540 billion since last year. China, unsurprisingly, is currently our second largest goods trading partner with $503 billion. Goods exports and imports are total $443 billion. The trade deficit between the United States and China costed $295 billion since last year. Trade service with China was around $36 billion. Imports were $25 billion, and exports were $11 billion. Same thing with Canada. Canada recently is our current largest goods trading partner with $597 billion since last year. Export goods are $291 billion. Imports are $317 billion.
The U.S. trade deficit between Canada was $36 billion. Trade service with Canada was a mere $28 billion in 2011. Canada is ranked third in the goods, service, imports, and exports. Now, good exports are $337 billion and imports $344 billion. That's a total of $681 billion. But now, the U.S. trade deficit is $8 million. Similar with Japan, their exports $113 billion, imports total $514 billion. The U.S. goods and service trade $514 billion. The U.S. goods and service trade deficit with Japan was $40 million in 2011. Japan is currently our fourth largest goods trading partner with $519 million. The U.S. trade service surplus with Japan was $222 million in 2011. In conclusion, economies on foreign countries do have a significant impact on U.S. recovery because we owe too much money to these foreign countries. Thank you.
The affirmative team would have you believe that free trade benefits our economy and the other economies and the workers in the other countries. This is wrong because free trade benefits big business while hurts the common man in America. The common man in America loses his job, and when he loses his job, he's losing his job to support other workers in other countries who are working as wage slaves. Must I remind you what an unregulated economy looks like? We had one in the US. Upton Sinclair recorded what one looked like in his book, The Jungle. All day long, the men would toil thus, his whole being centered upon the purpose of making 23 cents instead of 25 cents per hour. The man is in constant danger from the machinery and risks going deaf from the unbearable squealing of hogs. Altogether, it is like some horrible crime committed in a dungeon, unseen and unheeded, buried out of sight and memory. When we have free trade, we are giving jobs to other countries. And when we give these jobs to other countries, we have issues such as child labor, where the other countries have workers who are barely paid and are in danger because of their jobs. They don't have enough money to support themselves, and the whole issue is that they do not have their equal rights that they deserve because of their unfair employment. We have examples of companies such as Nestle, which discovered to have child workers by the Fair Trade Labor Association in August 2011, and the practice was not stopped. Other countries, such as Uzbekistan, has German companies that use child labor in order to promote their cotton industry. These free trade agreements, such as the agreements with Mexico, are promoting child labor in other countries and are working to have wage slaves. We need to end free trade and have a more isolated economy. This will not only benefit our common man by bringing the jobs back to America where they belong, it will also benefit the poor wage slaves in other countries by ending their slavery due to their unfair employment. In Meerut, India, the International Labor Rights Association found that even companies where they had said that they were free trade and that they had met international regulations without child labor and any other issue, these companies were still found by the International Labor Rights Forum to have a statement that they released a statement saying that these companies still had child labor despite their supposed meeting of the regulations from the child labor. In addition, the other countries have less quality goods. The Global Times, an offshoot of CNN, found that 30 internationally recognized brands from 11 foreign countries were below regulation standards. These clothings that were tested, 43.5%.
Time's up.
Thank you.
If you have heard from my first opponent, the Great Depression, what does the Great Depression have to do with foreign countries impacting our recovery? My second opponent, doesn't everyone put a strain on the government besides outsourcing what she said is true? My third opponent stated that the free trade agreement doesn't affect us, and it only affects big businesses. Well, it affects small businesses too. We actually have more small businesses than big businesses. Now, what my opponents are trying to say is that these foreign countries does not have an impact on our country's recovery. May I mention that my teammates have said that the relationship between China and the United States, there's a trade deficit. That's true, but China isn't the only foreign country. We also have Singapore and Germany, but we have a surplus in both of those countries. Now, those countries, with Singapore, there's a $54.5 billion surplus, and with Germany, there's a $31 billion surplus. Now let me tell you again, the economies of foreign countries don't have a significant impact on the U.S. recovery. Thank you.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, provide for the common defense, ensure the blessings of liberty upon ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. Now, there's one phrase in that really sticks out to me, and that's ensure domestic tranquility. And that's pretty hard to define. In the whole history of our country, we have been unable to define it. The smartest men in our country in Congress are still working to define it. But the answer to what ensuring domestic tranquility is not is simple. It is not outsourcing. It is not a 33.1% decrease in jobs in the last 10 years in manufacturing. It is not 5.7 million unemployed, and it is not over $16 trillion in debt due to outsourcing. As stated by the first speaker in the opposition, isolation from foreign affairs helped us get out of the Great Depression. Right now, the U.S. is in a downward spiral. We were in the Great Recession. If we isolate ourselves and get rid of outsourcing, we have a chance to bounce back. And as stated earlier in the healthcare argument, China's unemployment rate right now is 4.3%. Ours is significantly higher than that. So outsourcing does benefit economies, just not ours. Free trade does benefit businesses. However, those are large businesses. Those are not where the jobs are. Those are the businesses that are outsourcing. Those are the Nestle, the Nikes, all those that are outsourcing to other countries. And outsourcing does not benefit our country. It takes jobs away. Billy Joe down the street can't buy his son a nice Christmas present because he doesn't have his manufacturing job anymore. And another point that was made is that as outsourcing goes up, prices do go down in the U.S. But what use are lower prices if we don't have any jobs that make us money to buy those items at lower prices? As these jobs are shipped overseas, the living conditions overseas go down as well. Working for pennies on the day, working in unsafe living conditions, these are things that are unheard of in our great country. We need to isolate. The U.S. trade deficit is only rising and our economy is sinking. With that, outsourcing is not the answer. The common man cannot survive in America much longer if we keep sending jobs overseas. So, what is the answer? Get rid of outsourcing and bring the jobs back to the U.S. Thank you.
First of all, I want to congratulate all the participants on a very strong effort. I learned quite a bit about many of these issues today, and I'm going to get back in the lab myself and do some additional research. But at this time, as you said, the judges had a pretty tough decision because all groups really stepped up to the plate and handled their business this morning. So I will start off with the third place winner. The third place winner is the future of education. Please come down front and receive your trophy and prize. the second place winner, Team Cincinnatus. And the overall winner for this year's 2012 Cincinnati Great Youth Debate is We Care Healthcare. At this time, I would like to thank the judges for your work and your service this afternoon. At this time, the other participants can come up and receive their trophy and their prizes. I urge all the participants to use the skills and the methods that they've used during the preparation for this debate when you move on to higher education and on to your professional careers, because there'll be times that there will be complex issues that you will have to sort out, and you will have to look at both sides of every issue. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to call up the Executive Director of the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission, Dr. Erica King Betts.
I can't thank the students enough for bringing their talents, bringing their gifts here each and every Saturday and working with all of the mentors who supported them, all of their coaches who supported them. And so I would just like for us to give them just another round of applause. The parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the siblings, everyone who helped our youth to get here each and every Saturday to their practices. I'm a parent myself, and I was out on the football field cheering this morning, so I know what it feels like just to cheer your child on. I'm extremely proud of everyone and just everyone who helped to put this program together. I thank you all for coming. There will be refreshments in room 300. And we hope that you continue just to support our agency and continue to come year after year after year. Thank you.